1. Bayonet. The bayonet was a comparatively simple weapon. Bayonets are believed to have originated in medieval China, but by the late 17th century they were widely used in Europe. The bayonet charge was also an important tactic in modern warfare. Bayonet charges were designed for psychological impact. Men were trained to advance in rows, with faces contorted, lungs blaring and bayonets thrusting. Bayonet injuries were cruel, particularly since British soldiers were trained to thrust the bayonet home then give it a sharp twist to the left, thus making the wound fatal. Perhaps the shock and awe value of the bayonet is what made those 19th century generals so enamored of it. Jonathan Bastable, historian. 2. Rifles. The rifle was standard issue for infantrymen from each country. Rifles were relatively cheap to produce, reasonably accurate and easy to carry. Almost all British and British Imperial soldiers were issued with the Lee Enfield 303, German troops received a 7.92mm Mauser and French soldiers the 8mm Lebel and Berthier. All were bolt-action repeating rifles, meaning that each round was fed into the chamber manually before firing. More than 40 million rifles were used on the battlefields of World War I. The Lee Enfield was not as effective as a semi-automatic, but with a 10-round magazine and a quick bolt action, it was far better for rapid fire than the German Kar 98K Mauser. Unfortunately, British rifle training emphasized pinpoint accuracy rather than volume of fire. Alan Converse, historian. 3. Flamethrowers. Flamethrowers are devices for spreading fire over significant distances. Usually wielded by one or two soldiers carrying a backpack or tank, flamethrowers used pressurized gas to spurt burning oil or gasoline up to 40 meters. Like chemical weapons, flamethrowers were also psychological weapons, not frequently used but designed to strike terror into the enemy. The first Flammenwerfer was developed by the German military and used in battle in late 1914. They were used more extensively in Flanders in 1915, causing terror among British soldiers and claims of wartime atrocities in the British press. The psychological effects were comparable to those of gas, and that was not all the two had in common. Just as many soldiers became the victims of their own gas, the flamethrower gave a new slant to the term, friendly fire. The weapon became extremely hazardous for those using it. Leo van Bergen, historian. 4. Torpedoes. Torpedoes are self-propelled missiles capable of being launched from submarines and ships or dropped into the sea from the undercarriage of planes. Each torpedo contained several hundred pounds of explosive, usually TNT, that detonated on contact with the hull of its target. As the war progressed, the British made rapid advances in underwater torpedoes and managed to sink at least 18 German U-boats with them. The first torpedoes, produced in the 1870s, ran on compressed air and were slow and inaccurate. The German Navy pioneered the diesel-powered motorized torpedo. By 1914, German torpedoes could travel at up to 75 km per hour over ranges up to 10 km. The Germans' combination of submarine and torpedo technology came close to winning the First World War for the German Navy in 1917. The Allies were terror-stricken by the invisible enemy. By World War I, German models weighed almost 2,500 pounds and cruised at speeds close to 40 miles per hour. Jason Ritchie, historian. 5. Artillery. No weaponry had a greater impact on the battlefields of World War I than artillery. These large and powerful guns fired explosive shells against enemy positions, causing enormous damage to men, equipment and the landscape. At the Battle of the Somme in 1916, almost 1.8 million shells were fired on German lines in the space of just 1 week. The largest single artillery piece was the German-built Paris gun, used to shell the French capital from 120 kilometers away. Even after the appearance during World War I of machine guns, tanks and attack aircraft, artillery remained the major source of firepower on the battlefield. World War I is an example of a period in which firepower technology got far ahead of mobility technology, and the result was trench warfare. Spencer Tucker, historian.